Hi guys, I'm Billy MFMaze, and kind of new to this whole YouTube thing, honestly. I usually do things live on Twitch, but here I am. Just thought it'd be a good idea to start a new park with you guys, and if you guys aren't familiar with me, I uploaded a few things on the workshop. I had a pretty cool Halloween build called the Grasping Void. I also made a scenario where you run an illegitimate carnival called Fairground Greed.
This sucks!
Well, I guess you're not interested in any of that, but you might be interested in what I'm doing here, and I decided to start this park off with a monorail station and a little bit of an entrance gate, and I'm trying to work on a little bit of a unique element for this building, in that I'm trying to make an arch, and using the circular technique, you can see I'm having a little bit of trouble with the 3D gizmo here. It's an interesting beast, to say the least, but eventually I got it to work with me by stacking these two things, or two of the concrete blocks together, and we're finally able to get it, pretty even across the board. But an issue that I had was that there was a few little gaps I didn't really pay attention to, and also the arch was just a little too small here. So I decided to kind of go back to the drawing board and try again here. Make sure that I account for size, which is why I have the concrete roofs down below, just to make sure that I have enough room, or that I'm able to guess the height properly for this building. As for Oorlund Park itself, the theme here is going to be a little well, I really don't know what the theme's going to be exactly. I want to go for a modern theme park, something that might have been built either in the late 90s or mid 2000s. But I don't really want to keep to the reality in which we have for modern or modernly updated theme parks, just because it's kind of depressing, honestly. It's just a lot of IPs, a lot of motion simulators, not really much work put into the actual parks themselves. You see Six Flags trying so hard to shoehorn in any kind of DC superhero into their coasters. You have Disney doubling down on IPs, making entirely dedicated lands to them. And Universal has always relied on motion simulators, and they've also done the same thing with IPs. They've been just taking sections from their tram tour, and just turning them into rides, and not really adding much else to them. So, yeah, I just wanted to kind of take a different approach here and make the modern theme park that never was. It's not great, and looking at other theme parks like the ones in Dubai, it's more of the same story, just this super reliant on IPs, and they don't really push the technology forward that much. They just push it to where it's cheapest, and yeah, motion simulators are just, I'm kind of against them. They kind of like the feel of more physical rides, roller coasters, dark rides, you name it, even spinning flats. But enough of that. I know that's kind of going a little bit on a tangent about that. What am I doing here? Well, I'm trying to add details to this arch. I added the railings up on the top, and now I'm adding little pillars just to add as details. You might be wondering what the middle section is, the colored concrete roofing, and that is because I wanted to make layers. It makes it a lot easier to separate all these little bits into pieces, or into different buildings, so that way you can have these individual pieces that you can easily recolor and not have to worry about selecting too much, because at this point I'm going to be working with hundreds of little tiny objects in one single area, impossible to select them all. So adding them into different buildings allows me to kind of work in layers just like Photoshop or any other digital art program. And I'd probably recommend you guys do the same thing too going forward if you haven't thought of it. It does make you, it takes a little bit of extra work, but it can save you a lot more work in the long run when you want to change something and you can't, because you'd have to delete the entire thing over again, or delete the whole thing and start all over again, and that's not really very fun. So that's more or less what's going on here. And yeah, it takes a bit of time. This is pretty much the main focus of the entire station. That and what's probably going to be coming up next too. And just trying to get the height right, trying to make sure that this thing's going to work. At this point, I am just looking at angles, inspecting all the little details, making sure nothing's clipping or sticking out, making sure that things are, molded fairly well. before I add these art shapes as a bit of a fill, so that we can color the inside, so that way it's not just, floating out in the middle of the air and looking a little hollow. This gives it a little bit more body. Say that really thick. But yeah, it's just the monorail station itself is it's a hard thing to build, especially when you're not really going off of a real reference. Though in this case with this arch, I was kind of copying a little bit more of what you see with the entrances of indoor theme parks, and how they usually have this very nice decorated facade that's just basically covering a concrete building. And further on, you'll see that I kind of don't really go with the facade look. I try to knock down some walls that I place, make it look a little bit more open. But as you can see, I was able to recolor that pretty quickly without any real concern, and play around with those colors. So yeah, now I'm going to be working on the sign for the park. This giant custom sign made with the font that I used for the logo. And I don't know how people do this. This is the first custom sign I've made, and I really just wanted to tear my hair out by the end of it. It was so obnoxious trying to do all that, trying to fit all those little pieces into these little slots, and it came out pretty well, or pretty decent for what it was. This font it's a cool looking font, but it's really hard to conform the art pieces to it, just because it's italicized and there's a bunch of weird elements to it that there aren't really pieces that are small enough that would fit, so you kind of have to go without it. That's why there's some empty corners here and there. You don't really notice them from looking at the sign from afar, but up close you'll probably see it. But one thing I kind of learned that helped soften the blow a little bit when trying to make custom signs is that a lot of fonts kind of share the same elements between letters, so you're really able to just save a lot of time by copying letters over, making a few tweaks, changing them up a little bit. And also, for those who don't know, you want to use a billboard with a custom image, preferably the text that you're trying to copy over, and that you would you just basically just trace over it. Not even really tracing, you're actually like filling it in. It's like a coloring book. That's what you're mainly doing. And yeah, this was a big giant piece of part of the labor for this station. It's just a sign, but I think it turned out really nicely. At least, hopefully you guys think so too. And right now we're working on the letter K, which is probably the more unique letter out of this entire bunch here in Oorlund Park. As for what Oorlund means, it really doesn't mean anything. I was specifically looking for a name that didn't really have any connections or ties to anything else, or whatever. I think the story here is that there's just a guy named, Patrick W. Oorlund or something like that, who decides that, he won the lottery about, 4 times and had enough money saved up to build a theme park. And he wanted to build a modern theme park without any movie properties, because he didn't want to pay more money for licensing. He just wanted to pay for the rides engineering on its own. And will he be successful? Well, time will tell. In the construction of Oorlund Park, maybe he goes bankrupt and the park suffers a financial crisis. Maybe he actually turns out to be the best theme park owner in the entire world. Well, you'll just have to tune in to the rest of the episodes and see. But yeah, this is actually the first time, as I kind of mentioned in the intro, that I've done a time-lapse park like this on YouTube. I usually work on Twitch. I've been live streaming Planet Coaster for over a year now, and it's been a lot of fun. And I'm very familiar with the game, but I just never really dove into YouTube. But meeting a lot of friends who are very experienced in YouTube, Delay Designer, Mike Sheets, Matt's Bandit, Commando Santa, Ruble Trillions, Beyond You, 89. There's so many that kind of sparked my interest in this, and I was able to talk to them. Oh yeah, Jonty or Geekism is another. They sparked my interest in it, and I wanted to give it the good old college try, so to speak. But yeah, it's just kind of hard to really just figure out where I want to take this park. because it is going to be fairly unique. I'm not really emulating a style that probably exists in the real world, because again, I'm trying to keep it realistic, sure, keep things in scale, keep things, you know, I'm trying to make a backstage area and all that too. But yeah, hopefully we're able to accomplish great things here. As you can see here, I'm placing the sign right now, and I recolored it quickly. This is also on a separate layer, just so that I can just highlight the entire thing and color over it. I also did a little bit of color work and just some ideas here for the front building, or the front of the building. You know, playing around with art shapes, playing around with overhangs here. You know, just give this sign a little bit of support instead of just floating off in the middle of nowhere or just being attached to the wall. And at this point, I extended that platform because I definitely needed a lot more room because this sign is large. And, you know, this footage here is just me trying to fill the rest of the letters in. And we jump into fixing up this, the rest of this building. Trying to decide on the textures for the walls, removing the gray boxing specifically. And, you know, I feel pretty happy with the final result, but it's not yet finished. I think there's a few tweaks I can make. And, you know, this video is only for the first half of this video. Or, sorry, the first half of this the station. There's the second half, the back, that really needs a lot of love. But that's probably not going to be decided until I really get behind this gate. And I think for the next episode, I'm going to be working on the front, basically where you have the ticket booths and the security checkpoint, leading up to this monorail station that acts as a little bit of a vista, or a gate. And speaking of which, you know, the new adventure pack that came out, I can't wait to you know, set up a vista point here, have people take selfies on their cell phones, and or you know, just photographs on their cell phones or cameras or whatever, or just sit in awe of this gargantuan sign and this really strange arch that I made. But yeah, there's a lot of trial and error in this build. Just trying to think about, you know, I want to merge classic elements and newer elements. You know, brick is a very classic element, but you know, as with stucco to an extent. But I wasn't really sold on the stucco at first, just because do I want something that smooth or that cheap, or you know, something without that much texture? And you know, I decided it was okay. You know, it's really hard to really pick what you really want in terms of building materials until you start recoloring them. But you know, like you can see here, I'm trying to experiment with a few pieces just to make it seem a little bit less blank on that canvas. And you know, that's pretty much what you're going to be doing in a lot of Planet Coaster creations. It's just trying to see what kind of fits and what catches your eye. In this case, you know, I placed down some neon, and I'm trying to experiment with some more planks and details just to add a little bit more. Placing things upside down, placing things in different angles and orientations, and you know, eventually you'll get something that you're happy with. But you got to be willing to try. And the reason why I went with neon is because it's a little bit of the new mixed with the old, even though neon is not really new anymore. It's it's pretty much what, the 80s and beyond at that point. It's fairly old, but I kind of like it. It looks really good at night. I still have to do the lighting of the station, but once that's done, it's going to look really vibrant and colorful. So yeah, I'm really happy with that. And at this point, I'm just putting these variable fairy lights here so that we can have some really cool effects going on. Just a lot more motion, actually, for the entrance. Because I think that's one thing that some people overlook, is just the level of, or just an element of motion. Just something that kind of makes it look a little bit more alive, that it's flickering and that it's, you know, breathing almost. And it kind of brings that building, you know, it brings a little bit of life to the building that might have not been there before. And yeah, just still decorating these walls because they're a little difficult. You know, even then, I'm still not exactly 100% sold on them. I feel like there could be some tweaks on them, but yeah, it's just kind of how it goes when you build in Planet Coaster. You're just really trying hard to make something. There's a little bit of one-upping, I guess. You know, you're not trying to be like the next crazy guy who comes up with the next crazy building technique all the time, but you know, you see what other people are able to do with some of these similar pieces, and you're like, okay, I need to kind of think in that way, and I need to kind of really break the mold. I think, God, I remember when I first started in this kind of game style, or this type of game, it was Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. And, I remember just doing vanilla stuff, and then I was introduced to Silverette, and my mind was not only blown, but it completely changed the game for me. And, that's carried over into Planet Coaster, of course. At this point in the video, I am working on the roofing for the station, and working on this curved overhang. At this point, I wasn't decided if I wanted the entire thing to be covered or not, or what. At the end of the day, I decided on a much more open design where, the midsection of the station is covered, but when you go towards the ends, it starts opening up and you get a bit more sun. And, it's important to not do a similar mistake that I did here, and you want to work on things like these custom roofs away from the build, and as you will probably see, after I do a little bit of detailing, I separate everything out. Because it gets a lot harder to try to, do custom colors or even carry elements over, because you want to just copy the grid pieces over and, save a lot more time for yourself. In this case, I was just trying to, again, do some details, experiment, take a little bit of what I've already done on the station and just carry it over, but adding something unique, in this case, the dome or the curved roof. And then I'm just adding, more details, a lot of detailing. Overall, the part count isn't that bad here. I'm not going crazy with custom shingled roofs. I just use beams instead of just one piece. It's about 10. It's not that bad. And speaking of which, I'm lowering the roof here just because it was looking a little too big. I wanted to keep this building fairly small so that it wasn't just overshadowing everything. But I think in the end, I might have made it a little too small. Scaling is a little bit of a challenge in this game because you want to, keep things realistic. But the game has its default wall unit set to 4 meters as your typical story height, when the story of a building is usually about 3 meters. So you have to adjust accordingly, but then again, you really wouldn't have a monorail track only one story above a pathway. Especially since, the distance between your head and the ceiling is usually only just a couple feet. And you don't really want that with electronic equipment or monorail rails or live electric wires. Just doesn't really, feel great. But, maybe there's a way around it. Maybe I can make this building a little higher. Maybe I can, move things around a bit, or, just avoid the low track at this point and then increase it or raise it up a little bit and be completely fine at that point. But yeah, just doing some test fitting right now and seeing if this all works out, and I think I'm pretty happy with the shape of it. Later on, I recolor it off camera and make it blend in with the rest of the station that we have, and so far I'm very happy with the result. There's some small little touch-ups I need to do. Need to take a look at that station height to make sure that we're not too low, but of course not too high. And yeah, I think that's going to be it for this time-lapse here. I want to thank you guys for watching what is basically the first live commentary I've done over a time-lapse, so I'm sure the experience was rough, but if you have any feedback, leave it in the comments below, and if you want to see some more Oorlund Park and what we're able to come up with this build, hit that subscribe button and you'll be notified when there's another upload. This show will be pretty regular, once a week, if not twice a week, depending on how quickly I can get out these recordings while balancing my own live stream, which you guys can also follow at twitch.tv/BillyMFMaze. But enough about me. You guys have an excellent one. I will hopefully catch you guys sometime soon.